Why is it that the signs were there, glowing, humming, almost whispering, and yet you walked past them as if they were invisible? Why do red flags so often turn into stories we only understand in hindsight, when the heart has already cracked, when the truth has already burned itself into memory? Today we begin unraveling this quiet mystery, not with blame, not with shame, but with gentleness. Because ignoring red flags isn't about foolishness. It's about being human. It's about how the psyche protects itself, hides from itself, dreams of what could be rather than what is. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And in the beginning, red flags rarely look dangerous. They look like quirks, like potential, like maybe they just had a bad day. They blend into the warmth of hope, the sweetness of anticipation. Our minds soften, blur, reshape reality because the soul longs to believe. Jung would say that we project our inner world onto others, unconsciously painting them with our desires, our wounds, our unhealed stories. So the red flag isn't just something the other person does. It's something inside us, an echo, a pattern, a forgotten need that decides not to see. Emotional blind spots form quietly, like mist. And in that mist, we often choose the version of someone that exists only in imagination. In this first step of our journey, we're not here to judge ourselves for missing the signs. We're here to understand why the heart turns away from truth, why the psyche shields us from what we're not yet ready to confront. Because every unseen red flag has a deeper reason, a hidden root, and a story we must gently uncover. Let's begin. Why do we cling to hope even when something inside us whispers, "This isn't right"? Why does the mind cradle illusions so tenderly, as if letting them go would shatter something sacred within us? The truth is simple, but not easy. We ignore red flags because hope is a powerful storyteller. It wraps us in warmth, in possibilities, in the version of connection we desperately want to believe in. As Carl Jung reminded us, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And sometimes, facing a red flag means confronting our deepest fears: fear of loneliness, fear of abandonment, fear that we might not be worthy of something better. So the psyche does what it has always done to protect us. It filters reality. It softens the edges. It turns warning signs into temporary moments. It calls patterns coincidences and excuses behavior that should have awakened us long ago. Hope becomes a shield, a beautiful, fragile shield, hiding truths we're not ready to hold. In Jung's view, this is the dance between consciousness and the shadow. The parts of us we don't want to see, our insecurities, our wounds, our longing for validation, quietly influence what we tolerate. We accept crumbs because a deeper layer of the psyche whispers that crumbs are safer than emptiness. We romanticize potential because potential cannot disappoint us yet. It lives untarnished in imagination. And so we walk forward with our eyes half open, half dreaming. But here's the gentle truth. Ignoring a red flag doesn't mean you're naive. It means you're human, shaped by past imprints, by longing, by stories you didn't know were still living inside you. Emotional blind spots aren't failures, they're invitations. They show us where healing is needed, where the inner child still waits for safety, where the soul still longs for connection. And when we learn to see these blind spots with compassion, the fog begins to lift. Awareness starts forming. The heart grows stronger, clearer, braver. This is the beginning of that awakening. There's a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when a red flag appears, and instead of stepping back, we lean in. We reinterpret, we soften, we bend ourselves into shapes that make someone else's behavior feel reasonable. And the question is, why? Why do we do this even when our intuition pulses with unease? Carl Jung offered a key that unlocks this mystery. The shadow is everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. And this shadow doesn't just hide our flaws. It hides our unmet needs, our longing to be chosen, our fear of repeating old pain. When someone enters our life and lights up something inside us, excitement, connection, possibility, the shadow stirs. It whispers, "Hold on, don't lose this." And so we overlook the warning signs that threaten to take that feeling away. Our psyche has ancient strategies for survival. One of them is emotional blindness. Instead of seeing the person as they are, we see them as a solution, a bandage for a wound we haven't fully healed. This is why red flags often blend seamlessly into the background. The unconscious mind isn't looking for truth. It's looking for comfort. Jung believed that every relationship acts as a mirror, reflecting hidden parts of ourselves. Sometimes a red flag reflects something we once normalized in childhood. Sometimes it reflects a fear we've carried for years. And sometimes, most painfully, it reflects the parts of us that still believe we must earn love by enduring difficulty. So we ignore what hurts. We rationalize what confuses us. We tell ourselves stories to stay in the warmth, even if the warmth is an illusion. But here's the turning point, the moment of inner awakening. When we recognize that the red flag didn't start with the other person. It started within us, in the shadow that longs to be seen, understood, healed. And once we see this, truly see it, something incredible happens. The haze thins, the intuition sharpens, the heart becomes wiser. Because awareness is not just light, it's liberation. Why do some red flags feel strangely familiar, almost comfortable? Why do we tolerate behaviors that our wiser self would never accept? The answer often lies not in the present moment, but in the echoes of the past, in the emotional imprints we carry without even realizing it. Carl Jung wrote that, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And nowhere is this more evident than in the way we overlook danger disguised as connection. Because sometimes a red flag doesn't register as a threat. It registers as home. Not home in the sense of safety, but home in the sense of what the nervous system has learned to expect. If you grew up navigating unpredictability, you become skilled at holding your breath. If love once came wrapped in inconsistency, you may confuse intensity for intimacy. Your psyche, shaped in those early years, whispers, "This is normal. You know how to survive this." And so we stay, not because we don't see the signs, but because the signs speak the language of our history. In Jungian terms, the child self, the inner complex formed long before adulthood, still tries to complete an unfinished story. It hopes that this time, the ending will be different. That this time, the hurt will transform into harmony. That this time, choosing someone who resembles an old pattern will finally bring closure. But emotional repetition isn't healing. It's a loop, a silent gravitational pull back toward what shaped us. This is why red flags blur. The psyche isn't trying to sabotage us. It's trying to resolve something ancient, something unspoken. It reaches for the familiar because familiarity feels like control, even when it causes pain. Yet here is the quiet liberation that begins with awareness. Once we recognize that our tolerance isn't rooted in strength, but in old wounds, the spell begins to break. The red flags sharpen into clarity. The body begins to whisper truth instead of fear. And the heart, slowly, bravely, starts learning a new rhythm, one that isn't shaped by the past, but guided by consciousness. There's a certain kind of hope that feels noble, the belief that someone will change, grow, awaken, transform. It's the hope that keeps us holding on long after the red flags have formed a pattern. But where does this hope truly come from? Why do we convince ourselves that patience is love, that endurance is loyalty, that if we stay long enough, the story will shift? Carl Jung gives us a profound clue. He taught that each person carries inner archetypes, powerful energies that shape our perceptions. For women, one of these is the animus, the inner masculine, the inner protector, the voice of inner direction. And when the animus isn't fully integrated, something peculiar happens. We project its strength, its wisdom, its potential onto someone outside of us. We don't just see the person, we see who they could become. And in that projection, the red flag becomes a footnote. Instead of noticing the inconsistency, we focus on the flashes of possibility. Instead of facing the truth of someone's actions, we cling to the fantasy of their potential. Jung warned that projection is powerful. We do not see others as they are, but as we are. And so the animus, the inner visionary, paints a picture that reality can't sustain. This is why we look past the discomfort, why we reinterpret their distance, why we explain away the inconsistency. The psyche whispers, hold on, you can help them grow. But here's the quiet revelation. When we believe we can inspire someone into transformation, what we're truly longing for is our own inner awakening, our own strength, clarity, and wholeness reflected back to us. And yet, the moment we withdraw the projection, the illusion dissolves. The person stands before us as they truly are, not who we imagined, not who we hoped, not who we tried to sculpt with compassion and effort. This realization isn't crushing, it's liberating. Because when we reclaim the energy we once invested in someone else's potential, the inner animus strengthens. The psyche becomes clearer, the intuition grows sharper, and those red flags, once softened by projection, come into focus with unmistakable clarity. This is not the end of love. It's the beginning of seeing. Before the mind begins its stories, before the heart constructs its hopes, there is always a moment, subtle, fleeting, when the body reacts. A tightening in the chest, a shift in the breath, a quiet sense of something's off. And yet, we brush it away. We override it. We silence the whisper because the mind, eager for connection, speaks louder. Carl Jung believed that the body and the unconscious are deeply intertwined, that intuition is not magic, but a form of ancient knowing rising from the depths of the psyche. He wrote that the psyche is made up of processes that are partly conscious and partly unconscious, and the body often expresses the unconscious long before the mind catches up. But why do we ignore those early signals? Because listening to intuition requires courage. It requires confronting the possibility that the story we want to believe might crumble. It threatens the fantasy we've built, the potential we've projected, the peace we hope to find in someone else. Acknowledging discomfort means facing truth, and truth can be inconvenient, lonely, or painfully clarifying. So instead, we rationalize. We tell ourselves, they didn't mean it. I'm overreacting. Everyone has flaws. This will get better. But the body does not lie. It reacts to tone, to inconsistency, to emotional unpredictability. It recognizes patterns we consciously overlook. It remembers the past more honestly than the mind does. And when the body speaks through tension, fatigue, or unease, it's offering a quiet form of protection, a signal from the unconscious saying, pay attention. Ignoring red flags often begins with ignoring this inner alarm. Yet when we begin honoring our intuitive responses, something profound happens. The fog lifts, the confusion fades, the emotional blind spots begin to dissolve. Because intuition is not fear. It's not paranoia. It's not overthinking. It is the voice of the deeper self, the part of us Jung believed leads us toward wholeness. And once we learn to trust it, red flags become impossible to overlook. The body becomes our compass. The truth becomes clearer. And we begin, finally, to see. There's a moment early in a connection when everything feels bright, electric, intoxicating. Messages light up your phone and your nervous system at the same time. Your mind floods with possibilities. Your heart races with anticipation. And in this rush, this chemical storm, red flags fade into the background like distant static. This isn't weakness. It's biology. Our brains are wired to reward new attachment with dopamine. the neurotransmitter of anticipation, desire, fantasy. It creates a haze, a shimmering emotional glow that makes flaws look softer and warning signs seem fixable. Dopamine doesn't care about reality. It cares about potential. It fuels the rush, the spark, the maybe this time. Carl Jung would say that in this state, we're not relating to the other person. We're relating to our own unconscious projections. The chemistry becomes a canvas. The mind paints illusions. And the body, swept into the tide of excitement, loses its grounding. Under dopamine's spell, we interpret inconsistency as mystery. We see emotional unavailability as depth. We mistake unpredictability for passion. We call anxiety butterflies. And all the while, intuition tries to whisper through the noise, but the chemistry is louder. This is why people often ask, "How did I miss the red flags?" You didn't miss them. Your brain filtered them out. Dopamine creates a temporary blindness, not because you're naive, but because your psyche is trying to fulfill an emotional narrative the unconscious has carried for years. As Jung taught, what we don't resolve internally, we continue seeking externally, often in the most magnetic faces. But there is a turning point. When the chemical haze settles, when the body no longer trembles at every message, when the fantasy begins to crack, something powerful emerges: clarity. And clarity is the antidote. Because once you recognize that chemistry is not compatibility, nor a sign of fate, the red flags no longer hide behind the thrill. They step into the light, and you step into truth. One of the most seductive illusions that leads us to ignore red flags is the quiet belief that we can help someone heal. That with enough patience, softness, understanding, or emotional labor, they will eventually rise into the person we see hidden beneath their wounds. This belief feels compassionate, but in truth, it is a deep form of self-abandonment. Where does this myth come from? Carl Jung would say it arises from the inner healer, an archetype that lives within many of us, especially those who grew up learning to soothe others before themselves. The psyche forms an identity around caretaking, believing that love must be earned through sacrifice, through emotional labor, through endurance. The inner healer whispers, "If I can help them, they will finally love me the way I've always needed." But here's the quiet ache beneath that hope. The desire to fix someone else is often a longing to heal our own unaddressed wounds. And so we stay. We wait. We pour energy into someone who shows us flashes of potential, but patterns of harm. We excuse their behavior because we can see who they could be, not who they are. We become devoted to their growth while abandoning our own. This is not empathy. This is the shadow of empathy, a form of self-sacrifice rooted in old conditioning. Jung taught that the shadow contains not just our darkest impulses, but also our unrecognized innocence, the part of us that keeps giving even when it hurts. This shadow says, "If I'm patient enough, they will change. If I love them harder, they'll become better." But the truth is simple. People don't transform because someone else suffers on their behalf. They transform because they choose to. And every moment spent trying to rescue someone is a moment spent ignoring the quiet red flags, the inconsistencies, the broken promises, the emotional distance, all disguised under the weight of your hope. The moment we stop trying to fix others, something powerful awakens. Self-respect. This is the point where the psyche turns inward, where the inner healer finally realizes the person who needs healing is you. And from that realization, a deeper clarity begins to rise, one that no longer confuses compassion with self-neglect, nor love with sacrifice. There is a truth most people rarely admit. Sometimes we ignore red flags not because we don't see them, but because we are afraid to lose what we wish the connection could become. The possibility feels too precious. The fantasy feels too comforting. And so the psyche begins its quiet negotiation. Maybe I misread that. Maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe things will get better. But beneath those thoughts is something far more tender, a fear of loss. Carl Jung often spoke of the psyche's instinct to avoid pain, even if that avoidance creates greater suffering later. He believed the unconscious will twist perception to protect the heart from what feels unbearable. And acknowledging a red flag can mean acknowledging that the dream you built around someone may never take shape. So you cling, not to the reality of the person, but to the hope they represent. Loss becomes the enemy, truth becomes the threat, and denial becomes the shelter. This fear goes deeper than the specific relationship. It often echoes old emotional wounds, times when abandonment felt like devastation, times when rejection carved scars that never fully healed. The psyche remembers, the heart remembers, and the inner child, still carrying those memories, whispers, "Don't let this slip away. You won't survive another loss." In Jung's view, the child self inside us fears endings even when endings mean liberation. It would rather hold on to pain than step into uncertainty. Red flags then become symbols not of danger, but of potential loss, and losing the fantasy feels more frightening than staying in the illusion. This is why we rationalize, why we shrink ourselves, why we silence intuition, why we stay longer than our soul wants to stay. But here's the gentle awakening. Loss is not the enemy. Self-abandonment is. When we begin to face the truth with compassion, not force, not judgment, the grip loosens. The fear softens. The heart begins to trust that it can survive endings, that it can rebuild, that it can love again without betraying itself. Seeing red flags clearly means choosing self-respect over fantasy, truth over fear, and consciousness over the comforting illusions the psyche once clung to for safety. The moment we stop fearing loss, we begin to see with clarity. And that clarity is the beginning of inner freedom. There is a moment in every confusing connection when the heart pulls one way and the mind pulls another. Your logic lists the problems clearly, almost clinically. They're inconsistent. They avoid responsibility. They don't show up. And yet, your heart lingers. Your emotions hesitate. Something inside you resists the truth. This inner conflict is not weakness. It is the psyche divided. Carl Jung taught that the human psyche is not a single voice, but a chorus. Different parts of us shaped by past experiences, hopes, wounds, and unconscious desires. And when these parts disagree, clarity becomes difficult. The heart remembers moments of warmth. The mind remembers moments of pain. And the soul stands between them, uncertain which direction honors the truth. So what happens? We freeze. We wait. We hover in the in-between. Because choosing the mind's clarity means risking the heart's heartbreak. And choosing the heart's longing means risking the mind's self-betrayal. This inner tug-of-war is one of the most disorienting reasons we ignore red flags. We simply don't yet know which part of us to trust. In Jung's view, this conflict arises when our inner archetypes are not aligned. The inner child longs for safety. The inner lover longs for connection. The inner protector longs for boundaries. When these voices clash, the psyche loses coherence. The result? Confusion, hesitation, emotional fog. And in that fog, red flags dim, blur, fade. We tell ourselves, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe this is what connection feels like. But deep down, something quieter whispers a different truth. The path out of this confusion is not force, it is integration. Jung believed wholeness comes when we allow every inner voice to be heard, understood, and softened into unity. When the heart is acknowledged, the mind is respected, and the soul is centered, clarity emerges without violence. Because clarity does not demand we choose between heart and mind. Clarity happens when both finally agree. And when they do, something shifts. Red flags no longer look like love's exception. They look like truth's invitation. An invitation to choose yourself with integrity, with awareness, with tenderness. There comes a point, soft, subtle, almost sacred, when something inside you finally shifts. You look at the situation not through the haze of hope or the fog of fear, but through the quiet clarity of truth. And suddenly, the red flags you once minimized assemble into a pattern you can no longer ignore. This moment isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It feels like an exhale, a release, a returning to yourself. Carl Jung believed that true transformation begins when the unconscious rises into consciousness, when the truth we once avoided steps into the light with gentleness rather than force. He wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And this is exactly what happens here. You begin to see, not who they could become, not who you hoped they were, but who they actually are. And even more importantly, you begin to see yourself, your patterns, your longing, your blind spots, your resilience. The awakening isn't about blaming someone else. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that once tolerated what your soul never wanted. It's about recognizing that your intuition was speaking all along, that your body was whispering truth, that your psyche was guiding you, even when you weren't ready to listen. And in that realization, something profound emerges. Self-trust. The red flags that once confused you now become signs of your growing awareness. The emotional blind spots that once clouded your vision turn into lessons. The connection that once held you in its grip loses its spell because you've awakened to yourself. This is the quiet revolution, the turning inward, the moment your inner world aligns. And from that alignment comes a new kind of strength, not loud, not hardened, but grounded, rooted, whole. You don't just walk away from red flags. You walk toward yourself. And that, in Jung's view and in the deepest sense, is individuation. The path of becoming fully, consciously, beautifully you.